America is built on legends of freedom, but hidden in its shadows are stories never meant to be told. Tonight, one of those stories will find you. Long before the stone towers rose along the Manhattan shoreline, the wind wandered here at full height, and at dawn, the forest edges rose from the mist. Where the Lower East Side hums today, the waters of the Eastern River licked the sandy shoal. The air smelled of iodine and fish, and ancient shell heaps cracked under bare feet. The Lenape people lived by this river the way one lives by breath. They wove nets from milkweed fibers, smoked salmon, dried meat, sealed their canoes with resin, and called the island Manahatta, the place of many hills. They woke before sunrise. The men went out on the ebb for eels and striped bass. The women gathered wild onions and berries on the coastal meadows. The children tossed dried herbs into the fire so the smoke would chase away the swarming insects. Wigwams, covered with bark, stood above the shoreline on dry ground where the wind tore less at the seams. The elder chief was named Wapanu, and his gray hair was braided into thin cords. He liked to sit on a fallen log, his cheek resting against his palm, listening to the sound of water. In it, he heard the voices of his ancestors and warnings of the future. The shaman, Metalucan, thin as a spear, knew the hidden paths of animals and herbs. And the young, quick, narrow-shouldered, with eyes reflecting the glitter of the river, learned from their elders to read the signs of the day. At spring, the tides ran high, and there was plenty of fish. One morning, at the turning of light, when the sun had not yet climbed above the trees, two hunters noticed something strange on the sandbank. Among the driftwood lay a man, dressed in soft dark fabrics unlike any hide or bark. On his shoulders hung a strange pack with straps, and on his wrist, a smooth metallic ring. He breathed shallowly, as if he had been running a long distance, and he smelled faintly of cold, or perhaps a coming storm. "The spirit of the water has cast out its friend," one hunter said, shifting his spear to his chest. "Or a stranger," the other replied and cautiously nudged the man with his foot. The man opened his eyes. They were gray and wet, like rain-soaked skies. He tried to rise, coughed, and stretching out his hands, said something even and foreign, like the rustle of dry grass beneath the moon. The words did not land on familiar ears, but the meaning was clear. He was not an enemy. They led him to the fire, and Wapanu studied him for a long time. The stranger bore no tattoos, no necklaces, no clan marks. In his hands, he held a flat black stone, in truth, a phone, staring at it, as though listening to its silence. In his pack, they found other curiosities. A box with a window and a round button that spat out tiny white cards. A rectangular heavy block with tails. The power bank. A roll of soft sticky bandages and metal tools. The first aid kit. Coils of cords, a knife, and a whistle. On his finger, a silver ring. If one looked closely, faint dark lines rippled across it like streams of water, and on the inside edge there were 3 tiny grooves carved like shallow crescents. "The waves delivered him to us," Wapanu concluded, turning to the shaman. "Is it a sign?" Metalucan inhaled the smoke of sacred herbs and said, "Sometimes the river flows backward. If this man does not lie, he comes from a place where neither our grandchildren nor our songs yet exist." The stranger called himself Nathan. The name rolled from his lips like a dry grain. He pointed to the ring and, with his fingers, slowly, so as not to frighten, made 3 turns in the air counterclockwise, against the running sun. Metalucan nodded in understanding. Every tribe knows which way the shadow walks. And so Nathan remained in the settlement on the hill above the river bend, where houses would one day rise, and where people would later call this place the Lower East Side. For the first 2 days, Nathan slept and drank water, recovering his strength. Then he began to watch, to listen, to thank with gestures. His black stone, the iPhone, remained silent, drained of power, but he found a way to coax a little light from it. At night, He connected it to the heavy block, and for a brief moment a tiny sun flared. The flashlight. The children laughed and called the light captured lightning. The box with the window, the Polaroid camera, became the greatest mystery of all. Nathan, squinting, caught faces through the small lens, pressed a button, and the box spat out a white sheet. Within moments, shapes appeared, and then, living eyes and smiling mouths. The wigwam filled with cries of awe. It seemed the spirits themselves were growing accustomed to this strange new magic. Among the Lenape, Wapanu allowed Nathan to live beside the lodge of a young widow, Chilano. Her husband had died on the ice the previous winter, leaving her with a small son, Tasku. This proved a blessing. Chilano spoke softly, patiently, and Nathan began to understand their language faster. He picked up repeating sounds, memorized gestures, and by the end of the week, he could answer briefly. Yes. No. Thank you. Careful. Don't touch fire. The first aid kit, with its red cross, lay untouched in his bag, until the day a young hunter sliced his leg while cleaning a catfish. The cut was deep and dirty, blood pooling quickly. Metalucan had already prepared crushed roots and spider silk to bind the wound when Nathan gestured, asking silently for permission. His hands trembled slightly, but his movements were sure. He boiled water, using Chilano's help, cleaned the cut thoroughly, pressed a sterile pad, pulled a strip from the roll, and wrapped it tightly. Over it he laid a clean cloth and finally smiled, saying slowly, "Clean, no dirt, heal faster. Knowledge is a gift." Metalucan watched his every gesture without jealousy, only deep curiosity. The shaman had always trusted the forest for its remedies, yet what Nathan brought was something entirely new. That evening, they sat together by the fire, and Nathan, using simple words, drawings in the sand, and gestures, began to explain. He opened the kit, laid out the bandages, demonstrated alcohol wipes, and showed how to remove splinters without breaking them. He tied sticks into a splint, demonstrating how to bind a broken arm to the chest. Then, with a deep breath, he pressed his palm against his own chest, the other hand covering his mouth, closing his eyes as if to stop breathing. He tilted his head to the side, and then, with short rhythmic compressions on his chest, mind helping the heart remember its beat, he didn't try to teach everything. He showed only the simplest, most vital things, things that could save a life with no words at all. The gathering at the fire. That night, Wapanu called the entire tribe together. Men sat in a circle by the fire. Women stood behind them holding children's hands. Nathan demonstrated again. Metalucan translated his meaning slowly and carefully. At times, the shaman turned to the flames, his expression troubled, as though debating silently with the spirits. Could they accept teachings brought by a man the river itself had delivered from the future? Finally, Metalucan rose and said, "The forest gives us medicine, but sometimes we are too late. Dirt enters the blood faster than we act. This man's hands are clean. Let him teach us how to hold back the blood and bring breath back to the chest. The spirits are not jealous of what saves life." From that day on, every morning and evening became a lesson. Children repeated Nathan's gestures. Hunters practiced rolling an unconscious man onto his side. Mothers learned to tie tourniquets above snake bites and to wrap wet hides around burning clothes. And most important of all, Nathan taught them to boil water. Something so simple, yet bellies stopped aching, children stopped dying of fevers, and the oldest of the tribe lived through summers they once would not have survived. For the Lenape, Nathan became more than a guest. He became a bridge, a thread woven between past and future, tied by a river that for a brief moment had dared to flow backward. One clear day, when the river water was green and transparent, Nathan finally slept long and deep. When he woke, he stared at his iPhone. The black rectangle remained stubbornly silent. The power bank surrendered its last charge, and the screen flickered to life. Hundreds of familiar icons, a frozen date, a world map he loved to touch. He opened the camera and saw Celano and Tasku, their faces caught mid-laughter. He took a photo and showed it to them. Light captured, memory preserved forever. Then Nathan pulled the silver ring from his bag. Its surface was scratched, tiny grooves packed with dirt. He traced the 3 shallow notches on the inside, like crescents of a hidden moon, and a thought rose like a whisper. 3 turns, counterclockwise. He gestured the motion to Metalucan, who nodded but pressed a hand firmly on his shoulder. The river has given your feet ashore. The river has its rules. If you leave now, you may never return to where you were. Nathan hesitated. He was no hero, no prophet, just a man tangled in a game too vast for him. Inside, 2 feelings wrestled, gratitude and guilt. These people had saved his life, and yet something in the air shifted, like thunder before a storm. That evening, smoke rose from the lowlands. The watchboys stumbled into camp, breathless. Strange boats. Long, narrow. Warriors are coming. The Mohawk raiders, faces painted, stone axes sharp, feathers trembling in the wind, climbed the sandy banks. The reason was ancient and simple. Land, fish, vengeance. Wapanu acted instantly. Hunters armed themselves with bows and spears. Women hid the children in the thick brush. Nathan stood at the edge of the camp, his pulse hammering. He had known these people for only a week, but something inside him whispered, "This is home. I must protect it." He grabbed his bag and sprinted toward the riverbank. Somewhere nearby, Tasku darted between wigwams. As fearless as always, arrows hissed overhead, one burying itself in the sand inches away. Someone screamed and fell, clutching a shoulder. Nathan dropped to his knees beside the wounded hunter, pulling out a tourniquet from the kit. His hands moved fast. Tighten, press, stop the bleeding. Gray eyes locked onto his for a moment, then softened and breath returned. He saved one, then another, a torn thigh, a gashed brow. His hands were slick with blood, not his own. Then he saw Tasku. The boy slipped on a rock and fell into the deep current, right where the sandy bank dropped sharply underwater. Nathan knew this place. On his first day, the elders had warned him. Do not swim there. The river pulls the breath from your chest. He ran without thinking. The water struck him like cold fire, dragging at his ribs. He reached Tasku, shoved him upward, forcing the boy toward the shore, and in that exact moment, an arrow struck him between the shoulder blades. The world tilted. Distantly, Nathan heard a scream. Celano's voice, raw and breaking. He forced himself to push Tasku into waiting hands on the shallows. The boy was safe. That was enough. Nathan tried to breathe, but the air would not come. He staggered, half-crawled, and raised a shaking hand. On his finger, the silver ring glimmered faintly in the fading light. A thought rose from somewhere deep inside. 3 turns, against the sun. The first turn, smooth, almost easy. The second, heavy, dragging, resisting like frozen stone. The third would never come. Wapanu and Metalucan dragged him onto the sand. The shaman whispered prayers Nathan couldn't understand. He felt the warmth fading from his limbs, but his hand fumbled blindly into his bag and found the Polaroid camera. He pressed the button one last time. The camera clicked, capturing the faces surrounding him. Wapanu, Metalucan, Celano, Tasku. Alive, crying, safe, and his own pale face caught at the edge of leaving. A white photograph slid from the camera. With a trembling hand, Nathan flipped it over and scrawled, in crooked letters, "If you're reading this, the river reached you first. Thank you. Don't fix it." He set the photo in Metalucan's hand, and then Nathan's breath left him. The river had taken him back. That night, the raiders withdrew into the darkness. In the morning, silence fell over the camp. No birds sang, no children laughed. Wapanu stood over Nathan's still form, brushed a hand through his short, soft hair, and said quietly, "He came from nowhere. He became one of us. We will not take his spirit. He will rest here, as family." They buried him on a dry, sandy knoll, high above the river. On his finger, they left the silver ring. Around his neck, they placed a necklace of shells, so the river spirits would recognize one of their own. Metalucan placed the Polaroid photograph in Nathan's hand, sealing it carefully inside a birch bark case coated with resin. A message, a memory, a promise. Generations would pass. The forest would vanish. Stone, glass, and steel would rise. But under the Lower East Side, beneath the hum of a city that forgot him, Nathan slept and waited. Centuries passed. The ancient shell heaps of the Lenape were flattened by shovels, paving stones laid over them. Then asphalt, then granite. Where the sandy knoll once rose, a small vacant lot appeared, forgotten for a time, fenced off, forgotten again, and finally turned into a quiet park. On the map, it became just another patch of green on the Lower East Side, with a playground where children spun on carousels and cried with ears just as wet as Tascoo's once were. In the year when New York learned to seal its windows against the poisonous smoke of distant forest fires and silence the sirens behind double-glass walls, a man named Nathan Veres walked into that small park. He was 43 years old, an engineer obsessed with defeating the stubbornness of time. On his desk at the Brooklyn Navy Yard lay a strange object he bought at an antique market years before, a silver ring with 3 faint grooves on the inside edge. He had always laughed at the superstition surrounding it. Until one night a dense fog seeped into his workshop, a siren screamed inside his skull, and when he touched the ring, he felt something deep and familiar, as though his hand remembered it long before his mind did. Haunted by the feeling, Nathan began researching the history of Manahatta and the ancient Lenape settlements. One article led him to the very place where the old river once bent its curve. The park, they said, had once been a burial ground. Something in him whispered, "Go there, measure the land." On the day he arrived, construction crews were tearing up part of the playground to replace the pavement. Without thinking, Nathan walked straight to the foreman and spoke firmly about historical preservation and the need to halt the digging. No one understood why, but the machines stopped. Nathan knelt in the sand, brushing away the damp earth with his bare hands. The soil smelled faintly of pine, though no pines had grown here for hundreds of years. And then, the blade of a worker's shovel struck something solid. It was a small clay vessel, its surface etched with faint patterns, fingerprints frozen in its ancient glaze. They opened it carefully, as though opening a letter from someone still living. Inside, wrapped in cracked resin and birch bark, lay a small white photograph. Nathan's breath caught. The resin crumbled beneath his fingers, and when he pulled the photo into the light, he froze. The picture showed himself, younger, smiling faintly, standing among Lenape men, women, and children. Around him were faces he didn't know, yet somehow recognized. A tall elder with a shell necklace, Wapanu. A boy with wet hair, Tasco. A woman with a soft, sorrowful smile, Chileno. A thin shaman with a straight, unyielding back, Metalucan. Nathan's hands trembled violently. His heart pounded as though the photograph had come alive in his palms. He turned the photo over and read the faded words, written in shaky letters. "If you're reading this, the river reached you first. Thank you. Don't fix it." The ink smelled faintly of smoke. His knees weakened. The world spun. Nathan sat on the low stone curb of the park, clutching the photograph. The little gear in his mind, the one that separates understanding from chaos, finally clicked into place. I am him. He is me. His fingers drifted to the silver ring in his pocket, the same ring with the same 3 notches. Suddenly, he understood why his hand had known its weight long before his mind did, and why, in restless dreams, someone like him always turned it counterclockwise. That evening, Nathan walked home along the riverbank. The smell of fried fish hung in the air, just as it had hundreds of years ago, when the Lenape fires smoked under the stars. Children laughed nearby, their voices blending into a timeless chorus. Under a street lamp, he stopped, pulled out his phone, and turned on the front camera. His reflection stared back, pale and unsteady. He smiled faintly. A stubborn smile, the kind of smile a man wears when holding something impossible. He lifted the ring, turning it gently between his fingers. One turn. The air grew heavy, vibrating. Second turn. The city's noise faded, distant, hollow. Third turn. He stopped. In his hand, the photograph whispered from across the centuries. "Don't fix it." Nathan lowered the ring, slid it back into his pocket, and walked on. The night air carried the faint hum of passing cars, distant music, and the heartbeat of the city itself. Some rivers, he realized, should never be forced to change their course. Epilogue. The next day, Nathan contacted the museum, requesting temporary custody of the photograph so it wouldn't be locked away under glass. He spent the following weeks tracing old streams, long-buried knolls, and forgotten paths of the Lenape on ancient maps, marking them one by one. Silent memorials invisible to most. At the edge of the park, they placed a small wooden plaque, carved simply. "Here lies a friend who came from the future. He taught us how to bring back breath." People passing by read it differently. Some smiled softly. Others quickened their steps, thinking of other things. But the river remembered. It remembered the man who turned the ring twice, but could not finish the third. It remembered the tribe that sealed away a white memory with resin. It remembered the engineer who sat on the same knoll, holding a photograph centuries old, and chose not to turn time backward. The river flows forward. But when it must, it knows how to breathe the other way. And across both sides of time, all it ever waits to hear is the hardest, shortest word. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next story about the dark secrets of America.